The babysitting job that went horribly wrong. I took the babysitting job because I was broke, plain and simple. At 19, I was juggling community college classes during the day and a part-time gig at a coffee shop at night, and it still wasn't enough to cover rent, gas, and the never-ending stack of bills that seemed to mock me every time I opened my mailbox. So when a woman named Mrs. Larkin walked into the cafe one slow Tuesday afternoon and overheard me talking to my coworker about needing extra work, she wasted no time in making an offer. "I've been looking for someone responsible to watch my 2 kids," she said, sliding her business card across the counter with nails so sharp they clicked against the laminate. "They're easy. Bedtime by 9. You'll barely notice they're there." It sounded like the easiest money I'd ever make. I remember holding her card in my hands that night, the words "evening babysitter needed" scribbled neatly in blue ink, and thinking how lucky I was. She lived in the nicer part of town. The kind of neighborhood where the lawns were perfectly trimmed, the cars in the driveways were all less than 3 years old, and the air somehow smelled faintly of lavender, no matter the season. It felt safe. Too safe, maybe. But when you're 19 and desperate, safety isn't your first concern. Money is. The first night I went over, I dressed a little nicer than usual, trying to look like someone trustworthy enough to watch kids. Mrs. Larkin opened the door before I could even knock. She was in her late 30s, tall, with this unsettlingly perfect smile, like every tooth had been sculpted by a dentist who charged triple what I could afford. She ushered me in quickly, barely introducing me to the kids before rattling off instructions. No sweets after dinner. No TV after 8, bedtime at 9 sharp. Don't let them play in the basement. She emphasized that last rule so strongly that I felt my stomach twist, though. At the time, I brushed it off as just a quirky house rule. The kids, Emma, 7, and Lucas, 5, were polite, almost unnervingly so. They said hello, gave me small waves, and went back to coloring quietly at the kitchen table. No tantrums, no backtalk, none of the chaos I expected from young kids. At first, I thought I had hit the jackpot. The house itself was beautiful, too. Open floor plan, warm lighting, walls lined with family portraits that seemed just a little too staged, like something out of a stock photo catalog. The whole place gave off this vibe of perfection that in hindsight felt suffocating. That first shift went fine. I gave the kids dinner, played a board game with them, and tucked them into bed at exactly 9, like I was told. Mrs. Larkin got home around 11, paid me in crisp 20s, and asked if I could come back the next Friday. Of course, I said yes. Who wouldn't? But by the second night, something felt off. I noticed that Emma kept glancing toward the basement door whenever she thought I wasn't looking. Lucas clung to her sleeve a little too tightly, like he was scared of being alone. When I asked if they wanted to watch a movie before bed, Emma shook her head quickly and whispered, "We're not allowed. He doesn't like it." I asked her who he was, but she just bit her lip and went silent. Lucas looked like he was about to cry. I didn't press, but the unease settled in my chest like a stone. That's when the noises started. Around 8:30, just after I'd put on some cartoons to distract them, I heard what sounded like shuffling from the basement. At first, I told myself it was the house settling, old pipes maybe, or the heater kicking on, but then came the distinct sound of footsteps. Slow. Heavy, measured. My heart leapt into my throat. The kids froze. Emma's eyes darted to the basement door again, and she whispered so softly I almost didn't catch it. "Don't open it." I wanted to ask a million questions. Who's down there? Why does your mom forbid it? What are you so scared of? But I didn't. Something in Emma's expression told me she wouldn't answer, even if she wanted to. Instead, I tried to act calm, even as every hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I locked the basement door, scooped up Lucas, who was now trembling against my shoulder, and kept them both close until bedtime. That night, when Mrs. Larkin came home, I almost said something. I almost told her about the footsteps, about Emma's strange warning, about the gnawing sense that something wasn't right in that picture-perfect house. But then she pressed a folded 100 into my hand, double what she owed me, and said, "You're doing great. The kids really like you." Her smile was dazzling, but her eyes felt cold. I tucked the money into my pocket, swallowed my questions, and told myself I was imagining things. But deep down I knew something was wrong. Very, very wrong. The next Friday, I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what I always do when something feels off. I rationalize. Old houses make noises, I repeated to myself as I got ready. The kids are just imaginative. Don't be dramatic. But as soon as I stepped onto the Larkins' porch, the air felt heavier. I don't even know how to explain it. It was like the entire house exhaled a warning before I crossed the threshold. Mrs. Larkin left in a rush that night, heels clicking across the hardwood as she called out the usual instructions. No sweets, no TV, bedtime by 9, no basement. She didn't even give me time to respond before the door clicked shut. I stood there in the living room with Emma and Lucas staring up at me, both silent, both too serious for kids their age. We had pizza for dinner. I tried making conversation, but Emma barely spoke, and Lucas wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept fiddling with the crust of his slice, glancing at Emma like he was waiting for permission to say something. Finally, when I asked if they wanted to play a game, Emma said, "We can't make too much noise. He gets angry when we do." My skin prickled. I forced myself to sound casual. Who gets angry? Emma hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip the way I'd seen her do before. Then she whispered, "The man in the basement." I laughed nervously, the kind of laugh you let out when you don't want someone to know you're scared. "There's no man in the basement, sweetie. Your mom would never let that happen." But Emma didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just looked me dead in the eye and said, "That's why we don't talk about it." Lucas started to cry. I wanted to scoop them both up and run out of that house, but I didn't. Instead, I turned on a cartoon to distract them, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to. Something about the laughter from the TV helped cut through the tension, at least for a little while. But when 8:45 rolled around and I started getting them ready for bed, I heard it again. That dragging sound from beneath us, like furniture being moved slowly across cement. I froze halfway up the stairs. Emma and Lucas froze too. Their little bodies went stiff like prey animals sensing a predator, and then almost in unison they whispered, "Don't go down there." I locked the basement door again that night, even though I knew it probably wouldn't help if someone, or something, really wanted to come out. When Mrs. Larkin came home, I was pale, shaking, and probably looked insane. She gave me that same too-perfect smile and asked, "Everything okay?" I almost told her right then, but something about the way she was looking at me made the words stick in my throat. Like she was daring me to bring it up. Like she already knew what I'd heard. So I just said, "Yeah, fine." She tipped me extra again, sliding crisp bills into my hand like bribes. And like a coward, I took them. By the fourth time I babysat, I was jumpy the entire evening. Every creak of the house made my chest tighten. Every time Lucas flinched, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I kept trying to rationalize. Maybe Mrs. Larkin's husband was down there? But then why forbid the kids from mentioning him? Why not just say, "Dad works in the basement, don't disturb him"? No, this was different. This was wrong. That night something happened that confirmed it. Around 9:15, after I'd tucked the kids into bed, I was sitting on the couch scrolling on my phone when I heard a voice. Low. Male. Coming from the vents. I dropped my phone. My entire body went ice cold. I held my breath and listened. The words were muffled, but I swear to God I heard someone say, "Where are they?" I shot up and ran to check the kids. Emma was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide open, clutching her brother's hand. She didn't look scared, though. She looked resigned, like this was something she had expected. When she saw me, she whispered, "Don't answer him." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab them and run out into the night. But before I could decide what to do, the front door opened. Mrs. Larkin was home early. She looked surprised to see me hovering in the kids' room. Her eyes flicked to Emma, then to Lucas, then back to me. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice sweet but sharp underneath. I forced a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine." But nothing was fine. Nothing about that house or that basement or that family was fine. And I was starting to realize I might be in way over my head. The next week, I almost didn't go back. I sat in my car outside their house for a good 15 minutes, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, convincing myself to walk away. But desperation is a cruel motivator. Rent was due, and that babysitting money had become the only thing standing between me and eviction. So I forced myself out of the car, plastered on a smile, and rang the bell. Mrs. Larkin answered looking more polished than ever, like she had stepped straight out of a glossy magazine. Her lipstick was perfect, her dress perfectly pressed. "You're early," she said, her tone clipped as if that were somehow an inconvenience. She rattled off the same rules, her voice lowering as she repeated the final one. "No basement." Then she was gone. That night felt different from the start. The kids were restless, jittery shadows of the polite little angels I'd first met. Emma kept tugging at the hem of her shirt, staring at the clock like she was counting down to something. Lucas clung to my side and whispered nonsense under his breath, little phrases I couldn't make out, but the urgency in his tone made my skin crawl. By 8:45, the house felt alive. The walls groaned. The air thickened. Every sound seemed sharper, closer. At 8:50, it started again. That dragging noise. Except this time, it wasn't faint. It was loud. Directly under the living room. My stomach dropped. Emma grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin, and whispered, "Don't go near the door." Lucas started crying, rocking back and forth like he was trying to block something out. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the other side of the basement door. I thought my heart was going to explode out of my chest. The kids froze. I froze. Nobody breathed. And then a voice, deep, gravelly, and far too close. "Emma, Lucas, it's time." Emma's grip tightened until it hurt. "Don't answer him," she hissed again, her voice shaking but fierce. I didn't. I couldn't. My legs felt like concrete, but the knocks came again, harder this time, rattling the door in its frame. "Open up," the voice demanded. "I know you're out there." Lucas started screaming. Emma clamped her hand over his mouth, tears streaking down her cheeks as she whispered to him to stay quiet. My instincts screamed at me to run to grab the kids and get the hell out, but some invisible force kept me rooted to the spot. And then, silence. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over, that whoever or whatever was down there had gone back into the shadows. But then I heard it. The click of the lock turning from the inside. I snapped into action. I grabbed Emma's hand, scooped Lucas into my arms, and bolted up the stairs. We locked ourselves in their bedroom, barricading the door with whatever furniture I could drag across the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the dresser pushed in front of the frame. The kids huddled on the bed, their eyes wide with terror. From downstairs came the sound of the basement door creaking open. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving into the hallway. Every creak of the floorboard sent my heart into overdrive. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. Whoever it was, whatever it was pacing the living room, sometimes pausing, sometimes muttering. Once I swear I heard it sniff the air like it was hunting. Minutes felt like hours. My phone was in my bag downstairs, so I had no way to call for help. All I could do was sit there shaking as the footsteps drew closer to the stairs. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the front door opened. Mrs. Larkin's voice filled the house. "Kids, I'm home." The footsteps stopped. There was a pause, a long, suffocating pause. Then the sound of retreating steps, slow and steady, back toward the basement. The door creaked shut. The lock clicked. I didn't move until Mrs. Larkin called up the stairs again, her heels clicking on the floor like punctuation marks. When I finally opened the bedroom door, she was standing in the hallway, perfectly composed, holding a shopping bag like she'd just come from the mall. She looked at me, then at the dresser, shoved in front of the door, then back at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rough night?" she asked casually, as if she didn't already know. I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my voice gone. Emma and Lucas stayed silent too, their faces blank masks of obedience. Mrs. Larkin paid me double again that night, pressed the money into my palm and said, "See you next week." Her tone wasn't a question. It was an order. And the worst part? I knew I'd come back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because by then, it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about answers. About finding out what the hell was in that basement and why those kids seemed to already know. I wish I could tell you that I quit after that night, that I walked out of that house and never looked back. But the truth is, I didn't. I kept going back week after week because the combination of fear and curiosity is a dangerous drug. Rent money kept me tethered, but something darker kept pulling me through that front door. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't stupidity. It was this gnawing need to understand what those kids were living with, what secret Mrs. Larkin had buried under that basement floor. Each time I returned, the pattern repeated. Perfect instructions. forced smiles, overly polite kids who seemed older than their years, and always the basement. Some nights it was quiet as if the thing down there was asleep. Other nights the noises were unbearable, scratching, pacing whispers that floated up through the vents. Once when I was tucking Lucas into bed, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "He wants us to stay forever." I didn't ask what he meant. I couldn't. The breaking point came one Saturday when Mrs. Larkin asked if I could cover the whole night. "Just until morning," she said casually, like she was asking me to water her plants. Against every screaming instinct, I agreed. Money again. Always money. Around midnight, the kids had finally fallen asleep, and I sat in the living room with the TV on low to drown out the silence. That's when I heard it, the basement door creaking open. Not knocking, not voices, just the sound of it opening slow and deliberate. I froze. My body begged me to run, but my mind whispered that this was my chance. My chance to finally see what I'd been fearing for weeks. My chance to know. I grabbed the flashlight off the counter and crept toward the door. Every step felt like a betrayal of my own survival instincts, but I couldn't stop. When I reached it, the door was ajar, the darkness inside yawning like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I shined the flashlight down the stairs. I'll never forget what I saw. A man, thin, pale, his skin stretched tight over bones, shackled to the wall by heavy chains. His eyes snapped toward the light, wild and sunken, and he lunged forward, the chains rattling violently. I gasped, stumbling backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. He screamed, a guttural, animalistic sound that echoed through the basement and rattled my chest. "Help me!" he roared, his voice breaking. "She won't let me out!" My blood ran cold. She. He meant Mrs. Larkin. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the bolt. The kids had woken up, both standing at the top of the stairs, their faces pale. Emma's voice was barely audible when she whispered, "You weren't supposed to see him." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in a chair by the kids' room with the flashlight on, jumping at every sound. When Mrs. Larkin came home at dawn, she looked at me like she already knew what had happened. She didn't ask. She didn't explain. She just handed me an envelope stuffed with cash, more than I'd ever been paid before, and said softly, almost like a threat, "Let's keep this between us." I quit the next day, blocked her number, ignored the knocks on my door when she showed up at my apartment a week later. I don't know what happened to the man in the basement. I don't know if he's still there. I don't even know if Emma and Lucas are okay. Sometimes I think about calling the police, but then I imagine Mrs. Larkin's smile, sharp, knowing, dangerous. And I freeze. Because people like her, they have a way of making problems disappear, and I don't want to be the next problem. Even now, years later, I can't walk past a basement door without my stomach twisting. I can't hear footsteps in an empty house without my heart racing. And I can't stop thinking about those kids trapped in that perfect house with its perfect lawn, forced to live with a secret no child should carry. So why am I telling you this? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because I've carried it alone for too long. Maybe because I need someone else to know that monsters don't always hide under beds or in closets. Sometimes they live next door. Sometimes they smile at you in broad daylight. Sometimes they tuck their kids into bed and then lock a man in the basement before heading out to dinner. And if you're reading this, I guess I just want to ask, what would you have done? Would you have run? Called the cops? Tried to save him? Or would you have done what I did, taken the money, swallowed your fear, and pretended it was all in your imagination? Because I still don't know if I made the right choice.